Greeting, plebeian, and welcome to the epic voice adventures of the Athanasian Creed, where we go through the Athanasian Creed approximately one line by one line in Latin. Here is our rubric, everything that we look for whenever we look at Latin. You know this, you don't care. Let's move on. Symbolum Athanasii contra Ariano scriptum, quicunque vult salvus esse ante omnia opus est, ut teneat Catholicam fidem. And there we go. We should start off with the title to this document. Symbolum, as we can see, ends in this um, which is our common, either nominative singular neuter or accusative singular, masculine or neuter ending. As we take a look ahead through this title, we see scriptum there. Scriptum comes from probably scripto or something like that. It also has the This means that these two are connected. Obviously, I did not look up the actual dictionary definition of this word, so I don't know the gender. You know, I'm lazy that way. So we're going to assume gender being neutral, and I'll probably put a note in or something, like I normally do when I make a terrible mistake. So this is probably the nominative or accusative, singular, and neuter, paired off with this perfect passive participle. Together meaning the symbol having been written. Then we move on to our next word with it, which is Athanasii. This second I right here tells us that we do not have our normal nominative form. In fact, this word would probably end as Athanasios, after the guy's name, the one for whom this creed was written. Now we know that he probably wasn't the one who actually wrote it, but who cares about that? This can either be a nominative plural or a genitive singular. Since we already have this as a possible nominative singular, and there is no verb to go with Athanasii, then genitive singular makes more sense. Next, we have a prepositional phrase with contra. Contra always takes the accusative as its object, except when it doesn't, which is pretty rare. I can't think of a single instance. And we have that accusative with this Arianos. A long OS tells us that this is plural and masculine. I don't know why I put that period there. So altogether, this means already I can pretend to hear you calling out, "But what? You're putting an article in there? You never do that." You're right, I don't. I'm going to start doing that with this. As it concerns the Vulgate, I will probably still leave the articles out. But as concerns the Athanasian Creed, where it is appropriate, as right here, I will insert it, but I will do that very rarely. Moving on to line 1. Quecunque. This word comes. That was not proper English. I apologize. This word comes from a variant of qui, quae, quod, but in this case we have cum or cum added onto it, as well as the que. This word, in this form, is clearly either a nominative singular or a nominative plural, masculine. I don't know why I put that extra slash. Scratch that part out. Oops. So, in order to figure out which of these two is correct, we need to take a look ahead at our verb, which is volt, which comes from volo, vele, volui. Yes, I did in fact remember that correctly. Volt is an unusual form of a verb since there is no I, or E, or A before that T. This is from the volo, malo, nolo family of verbs. All three of these verbs form very similarly. Volo and nolo share almost identical forms, except that one of them is negative and the other is not. Malo is its own thing, but is still part of the family and follows the same patterns. You should look them up and memorize them, as I have not. Volt is clearly a third person, singular, present tense. You'll rarely see it otherwise, honestly. Active, indicative, except in the stuff I haven't read, naturally. So this means whosoever wishes or wants. An alternate translation of quicunque would be everyone, or all in the singular, if that makes any sense at all. We know singular because volt is itself singular. Cross out plural, circle singular, and move on before this video drags on too long. Whosoever that is, wishes, salus esse. Volt almost always will introduce a infinitive clause or a indirect statement. They're essentially the same thing unless you don't have the accusative form, as we do not here. Us tells us that this is actually the nominative singular masculine form of salvum. So that means I'm entirely wrong about this being an indirect statement. In fact, what we have going on here is an assumed subject, or a repetition of quicunque, a variant pronoun which we would assume exists in this part of the clause, linked with between esse and salus, esse being the object of volt, after a fashion. Essays, of course, are present, active, and infinitive of sum esse fui futurus /for. Salvus, of course, means saved. So, whosoever wishes to be saved, which pretty much every rational person does. Total number of rational people in the world? About 3. I am not one of them. Moving on. Ante, we have a prepositional phrase. Normally we don't care about that, and we don't care about that right now. Let's move on to our verb. Est. We've seen this many times before in our Vulgate translations, but you're probably not watching those, so you have no idea. Shame on you. Est is, of course, a third person, singular, present tense. I noticed that I didn't put a G there, but I did put G's in the other locations. I am horribly inconsistent. According to this thing, we're supposed to put G's. Well, I'm going to ignore it, because this is the Epic Voice episode, and I'm running out of breath. Active. Indicative. Looking before est, we see opus. Opus is an unusual word in Latin. Not only is it third declension, but it ends in us in the nominative. It also serves a special purpose when formed with verbs of being, like est. When we have opus and est together, opus does not mean work. It has an idea of necessity. In this case, we would translate it, it is necessary. Ante omnia. But first, nominative, singular, neuter. From opus operus. It is. End of prepositional phrase. Ante, in this case, is taking the accusative. And we know plural and neuter because this is an ia ending of a I stem adjective, omnis, omne. Ut. Ut is our wonderful word that we all hate. Taking a look ahead after ut, we see teneat. This EAT tells us that this verb is in fact special. If you remember from those Vulgate videos that you have never watched, another guilt trip there is a phrase, we. Oops, already misspelling it. Beat. A. Giant. This little phrase here is used to remind ourselves of the subjunctive changes in verbs for the present tense. Each of these words and the capitalized letters in them, except for that W, which is a clear mistake, tell us what the connecting vowels for the verbs change to when they become subjunctive. So this is for the first conjugation, this is for the second conjugation, this is for the third conjugation, and this is for the fourth conjugation, and what we should call the fifth conjugation, but is actually called the third IO. Not the planet, the family of words. Here we see EAT. There we say EA. There is also a T, but that is irrelevant. So this tells us that this is a third person, singular, present, active, subjunctive verb. This then tells us that ut is introducing a subjunctive clause. It could be purpose, or it could be result. Let's look ahead. Catholicam fidem. AM there tells us this is accusative, singular, and feminine. Of course, it stands for Catholic, which I will explain in a moment. Fidem ends in EM. That tells us that this is an accusative and singular. It, however, does not tell us the gender by itself because it is a third declension noun. Looking before it, we have Catholicum. Since Catholicum is an adjective and ends in AM, it has to modify something, or it has to be a substantive adjective, which means it's acting as a noun. The only way that we can take it as a substantive adjective, being the object of teneat, is if we had a coordinating conjunction, a form of and, to connect these two as two separate objects. Since there is no coordinating conjunction, Catholicum has to be modifying fidem, which then tells us that fidem is actually feminine. I know that really helps with our translation. So this, together, means what it looks like, the Catholic faith. Our two options here. Result cause. Whosoever wishes to be saved, before all things it is necessary, with the result that he must hold, or must is, no, that would be paraphrastic. Sorry, we don't have that. With the result that he holds the Catholic faith. That doesn't make any sense. Before all things it is necessary. Necessity indicates purpose, therefore. That makes most sense. And is also barely visible. Now, to address the meaning of Catholic there. Catholic comes from Greek, and that is, the Greek word there is kat echo, something along those lines. Yet another note will correct my egregious pronunciation error there and clarify it for you. Catholic means the universal. So this means universal faith. One would not believe in a universal faith. That is ridiculous. So in this case, we need to insert another article. And there we have it. Line 1 of the symbol of Athanasius. Whosoever wishes to be saved, before all things, it is necessary that he hold the Catholic faith, the universal Christian faith. And there we have it, dear plebeian. Thank you very much for joining me for Epic Adventures in the Athanasian Creed. Until next time. What? You're still awake? Why are you still here then? You should be reading a book. Or if not reading, you should watch one of these other videos. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. See you next week.